Okay, so folks, now we're going to start from tickets to show passes. And there's two types of sets of show passes. One are the real show passes that they have, and the other set of passes that people get nowadays are the VIP show passes, like Paul McCartney or Shania Twain, or VIP passes. They're not worth as much, but because they got good graphics, they're also collectible, but not the real passes for the shows. They're just VIP passes, but there's a lot of them around. And then one of the most valuable show passes I have is a Live Aid pass. And then I like this one for the graphics because Jefferson airplane with a ratty airplane flying around. So we're going to run through some passes that are worth something. As you can see, Abba. This was the 1976 Abba show, which is worth a lot. And I even have a ticket somewhere. And it has the pictures of their faces really young. And my buddy was the road manager for Abba, so that's why I was able to get a show pass at Maple Leaf Gardens. And I think this one's probably worth something because Abba didn't play too many gigs at all. They didn't really like touring.
No.
So what do you think that pass would be?
Passes, I mean, there's a bunch of different issues with passes. So one is people like these silk type passes. That's what they call these.
Yeah.
And one company called Otto made almost all of them.
Right.
And so people look for these passes. They're more in demand of others. And if they haven't had the backing peeled off, they're worth more.
Right.
Because, you'd stick them on your shirt, and then a lot of people always save their pass, and they try and put the paper back on it, but it's never quite as nice. This one looks like you did apply it to your shirt or something.
Apply it to my shirt.
And, that's probably worth $200. As you say, Abba didn't play many shows.
Right.
So it's very collectible. But then you get into the laminate passes, which there's more chance of fraud with those because people can make them. You have to be very careful buying laminates. These silk passes, I've never really seen them knocked off very often. But, the silk were harder to keep nice, but they're worth more if you do have one nice. And the other passes back in the day, I mean, these VIP passes you talked about were really a more recent phenomenon when the bands are scalping their own tickets. So
exactly.
It's like, hey, instead of paying $200, pay $500. You're a VIP. We give you a laminate and a T-shirt, right?
Yeah.
And they scalp their ticket.
Or some of these little passes, like this is a Genesis one, a Paul McCartney, the Who on it. So you liked it because you got the Who sticker with the Who pass.
But if you remember back then, and you'll remember this, there was other silk passes, but it was the radio stations.
Oh, yeah.
So you go and you get a Bruce Springsteen, and it would be
fake radio station.
Toronto. But they did nothing.
Yeah,
it was cool to wear. Yeah. People say, "Hey, you got a backstage." No, these got you nowhere. This actually got you backstage,
right?
And like often they would say, "Staff, all areas, all access," or "post show only."
Yeah.
They used to go out with handfuls of the post show only. They'd have the roadies just giving them to the best looking girls in the crowd.
Yeah.
And they'd all be invited backstage. If you're a guy, you had no shot, right? But that's where a lot of those passes would go. But that's worth a few $100s. That's a nice pass.
Okay, this one is a really good pass because the Allman brothers, they always liked their mushrooms. And even when you went to the show, a lot of the fans were doing mushrooms or smoking up at the show. But it's like Glenn said, it's an auto pass stick-on Allman brothers with their logo. So if you have a good one with the band logos, as you'll see some of the other ones we show you, ZZ Top's logo or some of the other bands, they're worth more because the people like you'll see the mushrooms on their album covers and on even some of their tickets. So
and it'll often be, you can tell by the actual drawing of the mushroom what tour it is.
Oh, yeah,
usually
that's
you can tell down the tour. Now this one's unused because what they would have did, they would have put a code in here to make sure you weren't using it the second night. Like if you had a pass for November 15th.
Yeah, they marked.
And it wouldn't necessarily say November 15th. It might be ABC or whatever. But they knew you come the next night, that's last night's pass. Get out of here. So this one just never got marked up. This would have been ones left over at the end of the tour. It's probably a $40, $50 pass, something like that. But it's a nice looking pass.
Okay, this is the Beach Boy pass, and what's good about this is it's got the Beach Boys surfing, which was all the Beach Boys was about, surfing music. And actually the Beach Boys, I probably saw them more than any other band. I've seen them about 30 times, lots of times at casinos, but I did work with the original Beach Boys in Chicago and seen some of the original Beach Boys shows. I liked this one because it was they're surfing, because that's what made the Beach Boys famous, And actually, when I was doing the Beach Boys in Chicago, you could start to see that Brian Wilson was starting to get weird from his fame and wondering what's going on. And Sandy, my boss from Cal Jam, him and me were in the dressing room talking to Brian Wilson. Are you okay? Are you going to do this good and all that? And you could tell that Brian was starting to change and get depressed. But he still played a great show. And then shortly after that, Brian left the band and the other guys took over mainly for doing it. And the only time Brian actually came back was at the 50th anniversary.
Yeah, and he did the pet.
Yeah, Pet Sounds
or whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah, well, he was in bed for 3 years.
Yeah.
But this one's good. It says backstage on it, which people like. And again, because of the graphic, you could probably narrow it down to which tour it is.
Right.
It doesn't look real old, probably an 80s or something like that. But they're nice looking. A lot of Beach Boys stuff out there, but still $25, $30 for something like that. If you had it before the show, it would be worth a lot more money because it would get you backstage.
Yeah. Okay, these are laminate passes, but you can tell whether they're good by the thickness of them. And I had a really good connection into CPI and Maple Leaf Gardens. And Maple Leaf Gardens with these laminate passes, they made lots of them. As you'll see as I go through them, they made their own series passes, and they always made them different with going on. Here to show us the original band has their faces, 1977 Maple Leaf Gardens. And the Beach Boys, they probably played more shows in Toronto than most places in Canada. They love Toronto. They're always at Maple Leaf Gardens, and they're always at Expedition Stadium. Sometimes the Beach Boys have played 2 or 3 times in Toronto, because of their demand. And then later, they always played the casinos. You could find the Beach Boys in every casino, but that was because Brian Wilson wasn't with them.
So this, again, it's probably worth $20, but you have to be worried about knockoffs because if you just got a piece of cardboard and go to Staples, or a lot of people have laminate machines at home, they could just make a laminate like that. Sometimes it's important to look on the back because you'll actually see it was a silk pass that was laminated.
Right.
That's a little easier to identify. The other way is, like you said, the thickness. It'll be a little bit thicker cardboard than just a piece of paper in there. But because that the laminates are knocked off, even though this is a real one, makes them worth a little less because people are worried about them. Now, this is another reason why you go to these authentication companies, and they'll authenticate it as a real pass.
So this is a good pass. It's the type of peel-on, stick-on pass. The good part is it's the Beach Boys with Chicago, which the Beach Boys did with other bands. They toured with them. So you have 2 big bands, Chicago and the Beach Boys, so it makes it more workable pass because 2 fans, Chicago or Beach Boys, want them.
Right. And it's cool it says stagehand. It's not a term that you sell, it's usually working personnel or whatever, but crew, a lot of the passes just say crew. This one's unusual saying stagehand. It's probably, it looks like it's a silk pass,
Yeah,
right?
It is a silk pass.
It's probably worth $100, $150.
All right. So this is a Bee Gees pass. Now, the Bee Gees passes are worth something, and this is one of those peel-off but V-type ticket. And because the original Bee Gees only played for a few years, finding Bee Gee passes are rare.
Yeah, well, they played much more before the disco days, but they were playing small halls. They weren't a big band, but then they became very big. This is probably from when they were a bigger band.
Yep.
But it looks to be in perfect condition. It's probably worth $50.
All right. So this is an Earth, Wind, and Fire pass. I accessed this pass in Buffalo because my friends was a road manager from here. But you can see Earth, Wind, and Fire. They got to have their magic design. What I liked about this show was it was American Thanksgiving Day that I went to the show. And I didn't really think it was American. I just got a call from a friend. Hey, I'm in Buffalo. Come and see me. We'll give you some passes to see Earth, Wind, and Fire. And so he said, come early, see a bit of the rehearsal and stuff. So I'm going, yeah, okay, I'll come and see my friend there. And then I found out it was American Thanksgiving. And backstage was a big Thanksgiving feast. So I got to eat with the band, a big Thanksgiving feast, talk to them, get to know them. So it was a funky surprise showing up having American Thanksgiving dinner with Earth, Wind, and Fire.
And of course, they had a lot of people in their band.
Yes, they were a big band.
All the horn sections and whatever. But it's great with this iconic figure on there, almost like native art or something. But, again, that's probably $75 for that particular pass. This
Elton John pass, if you look at it, you see Elton John wearing a hat. Now, this was an early 70s tour of Elton John. Now, why does Elton John have a hat on? Because he was going bald before he had his hair transplant. So a lot of his passes or shows back in those days, he liked the hat because he didn't want people to know he was going bald before he had his hair. So you can tell this is an early one. He does look young, but the hat gives it away because later after that tour, he had a hair transplant.
His face looks young.
Yeah.
But I can't believe people would wear hats because they're going bald. Like that seems ridiculous to me. But no, that's very early. That's probably $150, $200 for that pass.
And he did a small tour. This show was at the Sony Center, where he was just doing intimate small tours.
Right.
And my buddy was the road manager, so that's why I got a chance to see that. This pass here is Genesis Pass, and Genesis and a lot of their passes, which we'll show you some other ones, were always graphic. They liked doing graphics just like Peter Gabriel and all their other stuff. And this was an early trick of the tail backstage pass. I probably think it was at Hamilton Place, but I liked the graphics they did. And when you see some other Genesis show passes, they do it with some of their graphic songs.
It's great. It looks like Beetlejuice in the middle, but they've got a lot of strange-looking characters.
Yeah.
Just because of the graphics on this, it's probably $150 for that pass.
Genesis early pass, laminates from CPI, their Canadian Winter Tour 77, without Peter Gabriel at that time now. So I don't know what this one's worth, but you can see Donald K. Donald and CPI, they partnered on a lot of tours.
Yeah, because Donald, he owned Quebec.
Yeah.
For the most part, right?
And the East Coast, too.
The East Coast, and CPI had Toronto West.
Yeah.
So they did the whole tour. So he probably was primed for the shows in Maritimes and Quebec, and then CPI took everything from Toronto West.
Right.
A laminate, again, sometimes are worth a little less because people are suspicious of them, but, you know, I think it's $50, $60.
It shows how young they are, right?
Yeah, it shows young. And the other thing is sometimes if I see the back, I might say it's worth more because if it's a silk pass that's been laminated,
right,
people feel much more confident about it.
Now we have another Genesis pass. You can see their graphics there, and it's their Turn It On Again tour. And you can see, just like their other ones, but this one's more in color, so it kind of has more value of their graphic tours.
Yeah, it's a little newer, but still a nice pass, but it is a laminate. It's probably $50 to $75 for that particular pass.
So some of the biggest tour passes are Grateful Dead, and especially when you get the skeleton, because Grateful Dead are the skeletons, and you know the skeletons and the bear are the two iconic symbols of Grateful Dead. The bear because they thought Garcia was like a bear, and the skeleton was the Grateful Dead. You died, and you know now you're a skeleton playing.
You still partied and smoked joints.
Yeah, that's true. But they go pretty good, eh? Because they're
Grateful Dead stuff is always collectible, but there's a lot of it out there. Now you'd be able to tell if you look, and I could do it in 2 minutes on my phone and find. I can't recall off the top. There's so many of these passes out there, but you'd know which tour this is. This will say, summer of '82 or something, so you can identify the tour. And people always want to know that if they're buying one of these passes, they like to know when it's from. They don't want to know, it's 5 years between these periods. They want to know that was like for 3 months in mainland Europe in 1977 or something else. It is a laminate, probably again worth $50. It'd be worth more if there weren't so many Grateful Dead. And they would also issue more backstage passes because they always had an entourage that was huge, right? Like
yes.
Some bands traveled light. These guys did, and they traveled with hundreds of people. And crazy, like acrobats and every type of clowns. They'd have clowns roaming around. It was a real circus when you went to a Grateful Dead show.
Yeah. One of the better graphics of Grateful Dead is, the pirate ship, which the Grateful Dead were pretty good at looking at logo. And this was an all-area pass. And it does tell the year here, spring of '91. So,
and they called their boat the Ship of Fools, which is what they considered themselves.
Yeah, just having a party,
traveling and partying. Again, $50 pass is a nice looking pass.
So as you can see, this is the one I was holding up and showing it, and this is one of my best passes, and it is an auto peel pass. And what's good about it is Jefferson airplane, showing an airplane, but a mixed airplane of everything. It was just good graphics when they did it.
There's a I mean, these bands all broke out in the Summer of Love, 67 in San Francisco. This doesn't date to that. This dates much later, probably 80s or something like that. They are Airplane, not Starship, which they became afterwards. But there's a couple of famous posters, which we'll probably get to when we deal on the segment dealing with posters. But they've always had this image of this plane on the poster flying across San Francisco. And also on there would be Janis Joplin and all the other bands that came out of California at the time.
And here you can see the typical San Francisco housing from Haight-Ashbury days of their party areas and the plane. So it's a good graphic one.
Yeah, it's very cool.
So what do you think that one would be worth?
There's a lot of them around. If it dated to 67, it would be insane. It would be worth so much money. But because of when it's dated, it's probably $50, $60. They're not the biggest band in the world, but they're so famous because of Haight-Ashbury.
Yes.
That's really...
And their big songs of Need Somebody to Love. And that. All right. This Kinks pass is rare because the Kinks never toured much. I think they only did a few tours and then someone got sick or they broke up. So you didn't see the Kinks tour. In fact, they've been talking for the last 10 years they're going to get together, and then one of the other members died. And Ray Davies is still thinking of doing a tour with Kinks music. But, the lips and the songs of the Kinks, it works good for them,
Well, they just came out with a list again. They're doing these lists all the time of the most influential rock bands of all time. And the Kinks were in the top 20, of the most influential bands. Yeah. So they influenced a lot of other bands, whether it's Pearl Jam, Foo Fighters, much like The Who did and others. So there is a following for their stuff, although most people that buy it have never seen the Kinks live. It's like you say, not a lot of people have. Just like not a lot of people saw Queen with Freddie Mercury live because you had to go in the early years. But that's a silk pass, and it's unused. It looks to be in very good shape. So it's probably $50, $60 for that pass. I'm not sure of the year, but I would guess late 80s maybe.
It would have to be late 80s. Now, I actually did see the Kinks at Maple Leaf Gardens, and they were a high-energy band. Their music was good, and everyone was jumping on them. And I do have a Kinks Maple Leaf Gardens ticket, which is rare, too, because they only played, I think, twice at Maple Leaf Gardens. That was it.
They didn't tour a lot.
Yeah. All right. Kiss passes and Kiss merchandise is the most collected merchandise around because Gene Simmons licensed everything, anything and everything from pop bottles to books and magazines like crazy. So Kiss has the most merchandise sold, and the Kiss fans love buying Kiss stuff. So this is a really good Kiss pass in their little makeup stuff, all areas. I'm not sure how much it's worth, but Kiss has always been in demand because Gene Simmons has been a good marketer for Kiss merchandise.
Right. And the Kiss Army is like a big following. It was one of the first fan clubs.
Like a Grateful Dead Army.
Grateful Dead, exactly.
Kiss
like
Army.
the Deadheads. So they, I would say the passes maybe aren't as collectible as some of the toys and other figures. And people they buy the boots, the costumes, all that type of stuff. But the passes are still very cool looking. They did tour a lot. They toured almost every year. I'm not sure Asylum, but that looks like probably 80s. It's a laminate. It's probably a $40 pass, something like that.
The Monkees. This is one of the last Monkey tours, the 20th anniversary, where the Monkees got together and played. The good part about this is the Monkees has added a few other good acts like Gary Puckett and the Union Gap, Hermits, and the Grassroots. So you had a really good 60s show, and then the Monkees closed it off. So it's a good pass because it's got 3 other bands on it and the Monkees.
Yeah, and it's probably, 85, 86, because it's 20 years from when the Monkees TV show came out.
Right.
And it's unused, and it's a silk pass. It's cool. It's funny because they've done these shows after, and I've been to a few of them, and so have you, called Hippie Fests. They start calling, where they just bring out the Turtles and the whatever other bands that were not one-hit wonders, but more 60.
Yeah, Country Joe and the Fish.
Who had all their big moments in the 60s, and they bring them back and call it Hippie Fest. And this would be almost
the
like
early
a Hippie
Fest.
Fest.
Okay.
So, but I haven't seen that one before. I would think it'd be a $30, $40 pass, if not a little more.
Hey, Glenn.
Wolf, how you doing, buddy?
Good. I brought you a whole bunch of more rock and roll stuff to show you. And as I told you before, when you have over 10,000 rock and roll items, this is the place Glory Day Collectibles, that you bring your stuff to find out what it's worth, whether it's passes, tickets, t-shirts, programs, posters, and other rock and roll memorabilia. Glenn's group, they analyze it. They tell you whether it's a real autograph, a fake autograph, a good poster, a good program, or whether they're copies.
If I'll get lucky, I'll find a joint in this pocket. No, nothing. Too bad. It's always good. You never know when you find drugs from one of the roadies.